Hey, good morning. I'm Kyle Gatlin. I am senior pastor here, and I have a question. Do you want more? Do you want more? Of course you do. You want more money, right? You want more time. You want more rest, even though you got an extra hour last night. You want more. Or if you like half of this audience, you want more offense, right? You but you ever figured out, and you probably already know this, right? That when you seek more and you want more, it's never enough. It is never enough. You're always thinking, I want more. I want more. Right? The old story about how much is rich enough, right? And no matter who you ask, it's always going to be a little bit more than I have. Are you rich? Well, not really. Well, how much is it going to take for you to be rich? It's going to be a little bit more, right? But we always want more. We want more time with our family, or we want more time away from our family. That could be some of us at different times, depending on your family and depending on if it's Thanksgiving or not, correct? All right. But have you ever asked the question, could I have more of God? Could I have more of God? And you're probably going like, can you? Can you have more of God? And we're going to give you in this series called Deeper that the answer is yes, actually you can. Because our faith is not meant to stay in the shallows. It's meant to go deep. That's where our faith is meant to go. We don't stay in the shallow, we go deep. And we're going to look for the next 4 weeks at different ways that we believe the Bible teaches us of how we can go deeper, which means more of God. Which means more of God. And the first step is actually today, because you can't go deeper with God unless you go deeper in prayer. Okay? You don't reach deep waters by standing on the shore, and you don't go deeper with God without prayer. Okay? But that's the baseline. That is the baseline of everything that in our relationship with God, has to start here. It has to start here, because you need to remember this as well. Shallow prayer, shallow faith, deeper prayer, deeper faith. So you have the option, and you're living in one of those. Today, you're living in one of those. You either have a shallow prayer life, which means you have a shallow faith, or you have a deeper prayer life and you have a deeper faith. You're going to be in one of those camps today. But I want to encourage you not to stay in the shallow. That was a famous song from Star is Born, right? Lady Gaga, Bradley Cooper. Bradley actually sang that song, if you remember that story. And then one of the lyrics of that song, aren't you trying to fill that void? I'm off the deep end. Watch as I dive in. Now we look at that song and heard that song. Of course, it's part of a love story, right? Well, it's really more than that. It's about being sick of living in the shallow, tired of pretending, tired of chasing things that don't last, tired of surface level living, tired of living in a place where your soul stays restless. It's a cry for something real, something deeper. And that's really what prayer is all about. That's what we want to look at today. Prayer is how we step out of the shallow, out of our routine, out of our surface level faith, and step into a deep relationship with God. And you don't have a deep relationship with God without prayer. And it's just quick reminder. You don't have a deep relationship with people you're sitting around without having conversation, without being in a communication with them. It just doesn't happen. And it's the same deal with God. You can't have a deep relationship unless we're in communication with God, and that is prayer. Shallow prayer, shallow faith. Deeper prayer, deeper faith. If the shallow is where all the noise is, it's in the deep that we can hear the voice of God. So how do we get to the deep? How do we get to the deep? Well, we're going to look at our model, the reason that we even have a church to begin with, and that model is Jesus Christ. And in Jesus, we see something about prayer that he teaches us. And we're going to look at a few verses that show us of what Jesus has to say about prayer. For instance, he says this in Matthew 6:5. And when you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the street corners to be seen by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. So verse 5 says, he opens up and says, when you pray. He didn't say if. Wasn't a multiple choice. When you pray. This is part of the Sermon on the Mount. We've taught on this a number of times in this church about this teaching that is 3 chapters in Matthew. Jesus had this huge audience, and he chooses in the middle of it to say, when you pray. So it's assumed, right? It's assumed that they are going to pray, that these people who were religious people, first of all, so they were praying. They were religious people, and he assumed that they would pray. And we have the story here, and it's assumed we are going to pray. And it's like that prayer is the oxygen for our soul. When you pray, and he says, don't be like the hypocrites. They love to pray with everybody seeing them. Okay, so here's who he's really talking about. He's talking about the religious leaders. He's really not talking about average person that's on that hillside, on that mount, whatever, that is listening to him. It's not them he's addressing, but he's comparing the people that they all know, the religious leaders. And he called them hypocrites more than once, by the way. The hypocrites, they want you to see them standing out in front of everybody praying. They want you to see them. They want you to see them. And Jesus says, no, that's not what you do. What is interesting in this whole chapter, in chapter 6, is this assumption of doing something that these leaders do publicly, that Jesus is flipping and says, no, you need to do this privately. Because he says, I'm going to read you this, verse 2 of chapter 6. When you give to the needy, he's sort of setting up a pattern here. When you give to the needy, then verse 5, 6, and 7, and when you pray, and then verse 16, when you fast. So Jesus has set up this pattern as he's talking to these people, and all 3 of these, when you give, when you pray, when you fast, are all wink, wink, nod, nod, to those other people who love doing it in public. They love to give publicly. They give up their gifts publicly. They love to pray publicly. They love to fast publicly. How do you do that? Well, Jesus says they would put powder on their faces and they would go around basically telling everybody that they hadn't eaten, And he says, no, that's not what you do. You don't do any of these things in public like they do. And he called them hypocrites. In other words, they were not a great example of a person following God. They were not a person that was trying to have a great relationship with God because they were all about themselves. They were all about themselves. Which leads me to remind you of this. Prayer isn't for likes or views. Prayer isn't for likes or views. If prayer is all about what you can do for the public to see you, that's called content creation. And Jesus says that's not what prayer is. Prayer is not about content creation, but being content with the Creator. That's what it's about. So Jesus is really in their face about this, really in their face, letting them know. And then he goes on to say, but when you pray, go into your room, close the door, pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. And when you pray, do not keep on babbling like pagans, for they think they will be heard because of their many words. So Jesus is saying God's not impressed if you can say a lot of fancy words. He's not. God does not care about you rambling and rambling and rambling. That's not what gets God's attention. That's not how you have a connection with God. Have you ever been around someone that you're trying to have a relationship and they do all the talking? How's that work out for you? Right? You really can't have a relationship with them if one person does all the talking. And that's sort of what Jesus is getting at here. Don't in your prayer, don't go babbling on to God over and over and over again. Just be real. And just be honest. And what do you say? Well, will you do it in private? He's not condemning public prayers, by the way. He's not saying don't pray out loud like Trey just did. He's not condemning that. He's condemning if you're doing your prayers for likes and views. That's what he's condemning. But if we really want to have a connection with God, if we want to go deeper in our faith, we got to go deeper in our prayer, which means it's both and. We're talking and listening. We still go ramble on, give God our list, boom, 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 and go, "You good, God? I'm out of here." Like that's not what he's talking about. That's not what he's talking about at all. God is impressed with the real and not the repetitive. That's what he's interested in. All right? So I want you to understand, there's this phrase. I guess I did throw this up there, so I'll say it on the screen. Don't speak oceans of words with a puddle of meaning. All right, that's just something for you to write down and remember. All right, that's what you don't want to do. I wasn't paying attention, so there you go. All right, so here's the deal with the disciples. They noticed something about Jesus. They noticed it enough to where the writers of the Gospels would actually put this down in a couple places. And Luke records it in 5:16. Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. So the disciples knew this. It was observed that he got away to places. It was not about being in public and praying. He went away to the lonely places. He was by himself. Notice that we don't have any recordings of what Jesus prayed in those private places, because the disciples were not there. Nobody was there to hear what he said in those prayers. I think maybe the one prayer that we have is the prayer at Gethsemane, but John was close by, so we at least had some people that probably were in earshot of that prayer that he prayed the night he was arrested. But by and large, all those times he went away to the lonely places to pray, we don't know what he said. But the disciples observed something when he came back. They observed when Jesus came back, it changed the way he dealt with the public. What Jesus did in private impacted how he dealt with the public. And Jesus came back with clarity, with vision, with power, with presence. Every time. And it's really like the disciples were going, I want that. I want that. So one day in Luke 11, one day Jesus was praying in a certain place. When he finished, look what the disciples said to him, "Lord, teach us to pray." In other words, Jesus had gone off to one of those lonely places to pray, and he came back and they noticed. Hey, what you do in those times, we want. We want that. Because that is giving you power. That is giving you the literal Spirit of God. We want that. Lord, teach us to pray. Now, what had they, think about this for a second. This is, we'll just say halfway through Jesus' time with the disciples, maybe a little bit past that. The disciples, what had they seen? The disciples had seen Jesus raise people from the dead. They'd seen Jesus heal the lame, the blind could see, the deaf could hear. The lepers were made clean. And when, on this instance, the disciples asked Jesus the thing that mattered most, and it was not, Lord, teach us to lead, it was not, Lord, teach us to teach, Lord, teach us to heal. No, it was, Lord, teach us to pray. The only thing that really mattered. Because we believe that it was in those lonely places that Jesus was in that actually enabled him, gave him the strength, gave him the power, gave him the Spirit to do all those wonderful things, to say all the cool things that he said. And the disciples realized it too. Lord, teach us to pray. Lord, teach us to pray. Do you want that? Jesus gave a pattern of prayer. He gave a pattern of prayer. And it was, it wasn't just a pattern to recite, really. It really was not something to recite. It's really, this pattern of prayer is actually a pattern to live. Father, hallowed be your name. Again, he said, when you pray, Father, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come. Give us each day our daily bread. Forgive us our sins, for we also forgive everyone who sins against us. And lead us not to temptation. When you pray, not if, when you pray, what does he begin with? He begins with a relationship. Father. Father. Now he's telling, get this, he's telling the disciples, when you pray, then he gives them the example, he gives them the pattern. Now we know that Jesus, and when he prayed himself, we know Father, Son, Holy Spirit. There's no reason for him not to call God Father. But when he starts telling the disciples, he tells the disciples the same way. You guys address God the way I do, because you are his children too. It's about a relationship. Father. It's about worship. Hallowed be your name. It's about your will. Your kingdom come. God, it's about your provision for us. Give us our daily bread. It's about your grace for us. Forgive us our sins. It's about your guidance and strength. Lead us not to temptation. That's what it's about. This was a pattern to live. This was an alignment with God. See, prayer isn't just speaking to God, it's aligning with God. We align ourselves with God. We align ourselves to his will, to his way of forgiving everybody. Aligning ourselves to that guidance and strength that we need. Lead us. That's what this pattern of prayer is all about. But how do you go deeper in prayer? How do you go deeper? Well, I'm going to challenge you to do this. First of all, find your lonely place. Find your lonely place. And no, that's not at Cowboys. All right? That is not your lonely place. I know a lot of lonely people go to bars. That's not what I'm talking about. Find a place of solitude. Your fortress of solitude. Find that. Okay? If you're a DC fan. Find your fortress of solitude. It may just be a special chair, a special place at your house, outside your house, maybe a walk. It may be on your drive in the mornings. And I know you got to turn off talk radio. Rick Burgess will get over it. Okay? That may be what you have to do. Where is the place for you to go deeper? Quiet with no distraction. Because remember, deeper prayer means deeper faith. Deeper prayer means deeper faith. How about doing it daily and start with the pattern of Jesus? Do it every day. Find a place, then every day, and just start with that pattern of Jesus, where you're acknowledging that you are in a relationship with someone. You're in a relationship with God. You're in a relationship with the Creator who says, you can call me Father. And I want to be in a communication with you. I want you to have this connection with me. I want you to be aligned with me. By claiming that, God, I want your guidance and strength today. I want to be led where you are leading me. I want your will to be done. And I'm counting on you to provide for me this day. He's just using the pattern that Jesus just taught us. Pattern to live. And then pray with expectation. Pray with expectation. Jeremiah 29. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. That God is listening. That's not the question. That's not the question. You may be having conversations with people you're trying to have a relationship, and they're looking away and they're not paying attention to you, and you know they're not listening to you, right? Because as you're talking to them, when they finally respond, it has nothing to do with what you just said, because they're not listening. But with God, He's listening. He is listening. The question is, are we seeking Him with our whole heart? Are we seeking Him with our whole heart? Are you on the shoreline of faith today and just sort of dipping your toe in? Going, You know, it's not too long from now, if you're going to Panama City Beach, that you're doing that. You're going, ooh, it's too cold. I'm not going in. I like the beach, like the sun, but that water, not going to go there. Is that where you are? Is that where you are in your faith? Are you just dipping in? Are you dipping in? The depth of our faith will never exceed the depth of our prayer. I want you to remember that. The depth of your faith will never exceed the depth of your prayer. The question is, do you want to go there? Would you rather just have shallow prayer and shallow faith, or do you want deeper faith? So I'm going to go deeper in prayer. Is that what you want? Am I standing on the shallow end and expecting deep faith? Is that where you are? Shallow prayer, shallow faith, deeper prayer, deeper faith. So this week I want to challenge you. There's a challenge in the readings that we put out there. There's a link on the it's on the website, but there's also a link in the email that was sent out yesterday. If you don't get that email, please tell us and we'll get it to you. But there's a link for the 5-day devotional reading this week. At the end of every devotional of these 5 days is a 5-minute challenge. Whatever your routine is right now, whatever it is. And I don't know what it is. Some of you have morning routines. Some of you have noon routines. Some of you have nighttime routines. I want you to add 5 minutes to somewhere in your routine. Have 5 minutes of prayer. Have 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. Just to add 5 minutes. Because you can't go deeper unless you start adding. We'll add prayer this week. We're going to add something else next week. We're going to add something else the next week. Because we got to get off the shore. We got to get off the shore. We've got to go deeper. If you're not following Jesus to go deeper, then what are you doing? What are you doing? Add 5 minutes to your prayer each day this week. Watch your faith grow deeper. And I'm not telling you what to pray. Not telling you what to pray. I'm not even telling you to use words. That's something for you to figure out. All God is saying, He says, I want to be in this relationship. Call me Father. Align your life with mine. And sometimes that may be simply, for instance, this week, that may be 5 minutes of simply listening without distractions and just listening. So I hope you'll go on this journey with us to go deeper.